Good evening, everyone. I'm Amy Mengel, your guest host this evening for this edition of Higher Ed Live. I'm the head of marketing at Reed Media. We're the company behind Merit, which is software for higher ed to get attention for your student achievements and accomplishments. And I'm the head of marketing and research there. And before we jump in and get started, I just want to invite everyone to follow the conversation live on Twitter at Higher Ed Live or hashtag Higher Ed Live. You can follow me at Amy Mengel, and you can follow tonight's guest, Rich Rojo, at Rich Rojo. Tonight's show is all about how to structure an effective marketing and communications function at your institution. And when I attend conferences, which I do all the time, a lot of what I hear is marketing and communications leaders in higher ed asking each other, how are you structured? Who do you report to? How many people are on your team? What are their roles? What are they responsible for? How are you set up? And then most importantly, how do you prove that your institutional marketing function is valuable, and how do you get a seat at the table with the president? So tonight's episode is going to explore that. We're going to interview someone who's done exactly that. As Chief Communications Officer at the University of the Pacific, Rich Rojo reports directly to the president and advises her on how to strengthen the university's reputation and brand. And so we'll talk to him about how his team is organized, talk about best practices that he's observed from communications roles at other institutions, and we will go from there, figuring out how you can be structured for success. But first, a word about our Higher Ed Live sponsors for tonight's show. Omni Update is the leading web content management system provider for higher education. The company's CMS, OU Campus, is secure and scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. Check out how Elizabethtown College achieved their social storytelling goals using OU Campus. Omni updates CMS. We're tweeting a link right now. And Higher Ed Live is also brought to you by Integral, the creators of Schools App, a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. Check out their blog, Integral Insights, for posts on admissions and marketing, student engagement, and social media in higher education. We're tweeting the link to the blog right now. And for all of you watching tonight, and if you're thinking about attending the .edu Guru Summit, we have some goodies for you. The Summit is a 2-day online webinar-style conference all about strategic higher ed marketing, and it's March 27th and 28th. You don't have to fly, you don't have to book a hotel, you can do it right from the comfort of your desk. All Higher Ed Live viewers tonight can use the code 20HigherEdLive for 20% off the registration fee. And we're also giving away 2 free tickets at the end of tonight's show. So we'll randomly select 2 winners from among our favorite tweets tonight. So be sure to share your favorite 140 character thoughts from tonight's interview, and you could be our big winner. So I want to take a moment and introduce our guest. With us tonight is Rich Rojo. He's the Associate Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California. Rich oversees media relations, printed publications, event promotion, internal communications, web, executive communications, and strategic messaging. And he came to University of the Pacific in 2008. He's got nearly 20 years of experience in university, nonprofit, and corporate communications. Started his career in media relations and marketing at New York's Museum of Modern Art, affectionately known as MoMA. And then he moved to a New York ad agency where he managed a Fortune 500 corporate account. And then went into the higher ed world in California. Before joining University of the Pacific, he served for 2 years as Director of Strategic Communications at Cal State Sacramento. And he's also worked at UC Davis, where he led development of the identity, market, positioning, and sales strategy for the Mondavi Center for the Performing Arts. So, Rich, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Great to join you.
I want to begin by having you just tell us a little bit about your institution. What should we know about University of the Pacific, other than the fact that the men are squaring off in the NCAA tournament tomorrow?
Yes, we're a little distracted this week, I guess, with basketball. Men's team is in the tournament tomorrow in Austin up against number 2 seed Miami, which might be a tough opponent for us. And the women are also playing in the NIT tournament tomorrow. So as a non-basketball fan, this has been a challenge for me. I have to sort of ramp up on all of this stuff, how it works. Uh, University of the Pacific is the oldest university in California, I think by about a month. We were chartered in 1851, and and we were founded as a Methodist institution. We're still Methodist related, though not funded by the church anymore. We have about 6,500 students, and we have 9 schools and colleges on 3 campuses. We have our main campus in Stockton, with our core College of Arts and Sciences, College of the Pacific. We have a business school, education school, engineering, computer science, conservatory music, and pharmacy and health sciences school. We have a law school in Sacramento called McGeorge School of Law, and we have a dental school, a very good dental school in San Francisco, the Arthur A. Dugoni School of Dentistry, one of the top dental schools in the country. And I think our our signature is great teaching and really terrific mentorship, I think, and relationship building with students. Again and again, the students and the alumni rave about is the faculty and the educational experience here. Despite this week's distraction, probably not really known as a sports school, not a research university, but a really good teaching institution. And our other distraction we have going this week actually is our Brubeck Festival. Our most famous alum, I like to tell people, is Dave Brubeck, who graduated in class of 1942, who passed away in December. And in 2000, we established the Brubeck Institute. So every year we have a big jazz festival. Tomorrow we have Wynton Marsalis headlining, but we've had jazz events happening all week. So it's a busy week for us, but that's probably Pacific in a nutshell.
Great. So can you describe the Office of Communications at Pacific and tell us, how many people work in the department, how are they organized, and maybe what are their specific roles and responsibilities?
So our communications office has changed a lot. I've been here 5 years, and when I started, we had 9 staff positions in the central communications office, including my position. We had a couple of media relations people, several design and writing editorial positions, and a couple of other positions. We also had a couple of decentralized but pretty substantial marketing offices, one for the dental school, which had, I think, about 7 people at the time, and a slightly larger office at our law school in Sacramento. So we had 2 big decentralized offices and what I consider to be a small, for our size, institution, a small central communications shop. And then here at our Stockton campus, hardly any decentralized communications officers in any of the units, like dean's offices, which you find in a lot of places. So for me, it was almost the worst of of both worlds. We had a small central shop, nobody decentralized out in the dean's offices, except for our 2 other campuses, which had different needs. And so what we did is I started working on a staffing master plan and working on a long-term change. We also then had a president change in the midst of this, and we've staffed up now to a staff size of about 16 people. So 14 of those are professional positions and 2 administrative positions. And I think we have an org chart. We could show the org chart maybe now on the screen to what we've just switched into. Up until recently, we still basically had 3 functional areas. So the first was the media relations. We had a head of media relations and a coordinator. The second was a publications and design unit, so a couple of writer-editor positions, graphic designers, a photographer, and then a small web team. We're currently funded for 4 slots. We haven't been able to staff up to that quite yet. I've got a couple of vacancies. But PR, publications and design, and web. And then also with the last round of staff up, I've added a marketing person to handle advertising and videos, and which those were sort of falling between the cracks of the other 3 areas. And then we've added a dedicated marketing communications generalist who serves exclusively our development office. So she just works on fundraising stuff. And so we're almost starting to build a new line of people who are kind of marketing communications or what I would consider to be marketers. And so are we, I'm sorry, I can't see it. Are we looking at the org chart
Yeah, I
now?
think we had
Okay,
it up on the screen for a little bit.
great. So, with the disclaimer of there being a few vacancies on the chart right now, what I've done recently is shifted my web team to report to a director of communications who will be the head of media relations. In my mind, those two areas will play nicely together. I think public relations, media relations um, is increasingly tied to web, especially social media communications for us anyway. So those teams will work closely together. The publications design unit will continue, as it has been, taking care of university magazine, brochures, a lot of event collateral, invitations, and then there's a web. Excuse me, and then my marketing and development communications people, they'll keep reporting to me, and they tend to take on substantial projects of their own, and then they'll, everybody kind of pulls in team members as they need to on projects.
So tell us a little bit about your operating rhythm and how you make sure within those kind of three functional areas that everyone is kind of, pulling on the same rope and working together on projects, even though they're responsible for different aspects of them. How do you keep the team aligned?
Well, that's a great question, and I think we're still figuring that out because we've made a lot of changes in the last couple of years. So, I think there are two things going on. It's a challenge anyway with a structure of several functional areas like that. But then, as you add people or as people, move on to other places, then inevitably you're also dealing with individual people's strengths and weaknesses, and figuring out how to work those in, even if they fit along one tree of that org chart. The way what we've settled on recently is, I find it's often easiest if I sort of kick off a project and then get out of the way. And I will, I've found that, the team is starting to come up with kind of interdisciplinary project meetings and regular team production meetings where they're pulling in the people they need as they go to get work done. One of the important messages that I tried to give as we went into our new structure was that hierarchy and reporting lines are important, of course. You need those in order to do business, but I'm not sure they're so important from the point of view of project management, of teamwork. And so people are, I think we're becoming successful at this. People are getting used to, going to each other, whether, the person ranks above them, same level, or below them, and asking for things, pulling together a meeting, and working together on resources. I feel like my job is to monitor the people at the tops of those trees and work with them to troubleshoot, but to leave most of the day-to-day project management and workload to the teams. And that seems to be working. There are growing pains and struggles with it, but it's coming along.
So when you were talking about those functional areas, one thing I want to get your read on is this idea of specialists versus generalists in communications. There's different schools of thought on whether, for example, everyone on your team should be trained and equipped to answer media requests or should know about social media and web, and there's different perspectives on whether you should be organized around really strong specialist skill sets or if everyone should be kind of a generalist. So maybe tell us about how it's set up now, and then your vision for, in an ideal world, what do you think it might look like?
So I'm probably kind of an old school guy. As you talked about some of my background back in an ad agency and a couple of pretty large institutions. So I suppose if I had my way, I would want a big staff with a lot of specialists, and team leads, at the tops of those specialists. But the shop I inherited 5 years ago wasn't deep enough for a lot of specialization, and I would guess that for anybody tuned into this show and lots of our colleagues out there, you don't have the luxury of adding a lot of specialists at once, and inevitably your shop is smaller than the size you would like it to be. So I think 5 years ago, and this is probably typical with a smaller shop, I think we were more generalists. and I was much more involved in day-to-day projects. And I think, our PR people were doing more work helping to get out ads, do ad copywriting. Our writer editor people were doing more, helping out with PR needs and other needs now and then. The designer, was certainly, frankly, helping to copy edit certain things. And so we probably were more generalists. I'm trying to get to a place where for certain things that I think require high specialization, like graphic design, like editing, like media relations, certainly web work, I would like to have a good cluster of specialists in those areas, and I think that's what we're on our way to doing. Now, my ideal next step, though, would be, strangely enough, maybe to add some more generalists. I would actually like to have 4, 5, 6 pretty competent, well-rounded marketing communications people who would report into our team, but maybe like our new development communications person would really be here to serve dean's offices, the student life area, the conservatory music, and promote their concerts, these kinds of things. Somebody who would be kind of really tied into other units around the campus and know what's going on, but function as part of our team and pull in the design and web and photo resources as they need them, as they need those specialties. That's what I would like to build into. So I feel like we've gone from a generalist or a more generalist shop to a more specialized one, and now I'd like to complement the specialists with a few more general marketers, if that makes any sense.
Another dichotomy in communications, and you touched on this a little bit in your introduction, is kind of decentralized versus centralized. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you're pretty centralized at the Stockton campus. You do have some communications, an office at the dental school and at the School of Law. Mm-hmm. Are there any other communications functions, even people that don't necessarily have a communications title, at the university that aren't centralized under your office? Like, does admissions handle their own enrollment marketing, recruitment marketing, and how do you interface with any of those kind of black market communications professionals, I guess?
Yeah, that's another, I think, classic challenge in higher ed communications. Because of the way we sort of do a lot of decentralized functions and shared governance and everything. So I have certainly seen structures where my office would handle admissions marketing, although for the most part we don't do that here, and they use an outside vendor, a couple of outside vendors in our admissions office. There's some level of coordination and checks as they do that work, but it's not we're not heavily involved. Our alumni association does a fair amount of marketing to promote events and does an email newsletter. I think that's probably pretty typical. In our case, we write, edit, and put out the alumni magazine, not the alumni association. So we try to work closely with them. And but there are certainly models out there where the alumni association just completely handles that. My office, wouldn't do that. Another one, of course, is sports information. With athletics, and I think that is also pretty typical. Ours is decentralized in our athletics office, and I think that's pretty common too. So the challenge then, of course, is that assuming, like us, you have some people doing public communication out in decentralized office, and we're doing we have our messages, and the other shops may or may not be aware of that, and how do you coordinate that? And this is another, I think, next step for us, because I'm not sure how well we're really communicating across all our channels. I think we're very well coordinated message-wise and design point of view, look and feel, and strategy, key messages in my shop. But now I need to work with athletics and law and dental and admissions and other units to make sure that we're all reinforcing each other well. And so when I was at UC Davis, we had a big communications council that met once a month. There were up to 60 people at those meetings. So I think that in itself can also be a challenge. If you're at a big R1 institution, that can be tough. At an institution my size, that might be a little bit more manageable. So we'll start doing that, and we'll probably now that I'm stabilizing on the staff front, we'll probably start up more with retreats and strategy and key message sessions. But we haven't done that yet, to be honest.
So, and going on this theme of centralized versus decentralized, sometimes one of the advantages of a more decentralized model is that you have communicators sort of out and about in the campus more, and they can start to bubble up interesting stories of things that are happening. A concert that students in the music conservatory are giving, or students in the engineering college who win a competition. And from a centralized office standpoint, while that has its advantages too, it can be a little bit more difficult to just know what's going on in institutions. So when you have a centralized organization like you do at University of the Pacific, what do you do and how do you make sure that your team is figuring out what the stories are and knowing, what they should be talking about?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge for the centralized model. I mean, I'm a proponent of centralized communications, in colleges and universities. I think there are important advantages, and that's why we're working hard to build that to the extent we can, because it gives you the ability to really do good, proactive, integrated key message development and do good consistency and reinforce things in as much work as possible. But that is the challenge, right? I mean, that's the classic challenge. Is then I don't necessarily have eyes and ears in our 9 schools and colleges that will proactively bring me those stories and be able to be a good filter and judge, when you've got a great story that needs to be told and deserves the resources of central communications versus something, that the school can kind of do at its own level or the unit can do at its level. So I will tell you, what I've been trying to pull off, and for budget revenue reasons, haven't done it yet. But I would go back to my idea of these 4 to 6 unit level communications people that I would want to add in Stockton. Last year, I actually thought we might get this done last year. The provost and I did a joint proposal to our budget committee because she saw the value in this. Our idea was to co-fund this, have deans in the provost's office and my office combine funding to create some new academic, let's say, communications officers who would report to me or somebody on my team and be part of our team, but probably have offices, in a dean's office or out in the unit that it serves, so that's your eyes and ears. So again, that's kind of my dream to build that, and I'm hopeful that we'll do that, over the next year or two. That's what we've done successfully with President's Office communications and with development communications. So all that aside, we are as proactive as we can when we are working on the next newsletter, the next alumni magazine, web feature stories. Our 2 writer editors put out calls to all of the deans, assistant and associate deans, even sort of good sources of information like key department heads, people, who are, and we try to ask people for, what's happening. But I don't think that's a very reliable system, and I think it really boils down to who's receiving that email and how much time they have when they're happening to check that email, and how proactive they are in thinking about what cool thing they just heard about at the reception last night that's happening in this department. So I found, I've worked at 3 universities. To me, this is one of the biggest challenges. Is really having a finger on the pulse of what's happening and having a good, strong two-way communications channel out to all of your units. And I would love to hear ideas that people might have on this front.
I want to switch gears a minute. The chief communications officer didn't always report to the president at University of Pacific. So tell us about when that change was made, kind of what led up to it, and what's been the result? How did that transition happen?
So that's correct, and it's been kind of a long and slow, metamorphosis around our institution. And I'm guessing it may be. I think it's happening at a lot of other institutions too. Like many places, our office was a unit of the advancement division. Um, Even up to a year or two, I think, before I came to Pacific. So my predecessors would have reported to a vice president for advancement, and um, and the concern became that was filtering the work too heavily of the communications office, or what was in the marketing communications office. So before I came on board, they switched the reporting to the office of the president, and when I started, I reported to an executive assistant, to kind of the right-hand person to the president, a cabinet member, and a senior person. Then that president retired, and when the new president came on board, she wanted to even bring it in closer. She's a very proactive communicator, very prolific one, and I think just decided, I think in the first few months, if I remember correctly, that she wanted me to report directly to her. And that was helpful because that opened up much more frequent and reliable communication between her and me. So I would start hearing about things that we would need to announce, whether it was new board members or a decision that had been made that needed to go into a newsletter, whatever it was. But that was in 2009. It was only last summer that I was added to the cabinet, however, which I think did something different, because I would get pulled into cabinet meetings, I think, quite a bit when some decisions were being made, but not always. And sometimes decisions, were being discussed or being made without the communications person, me, in the room, to talk about how things look and other dimensions of decision making. So the president finally made the call last summer that she wanted to bring me into the cabinet, and that's been helpful because I'm much more up to speed. I think we're more proactive about getting word out to our staff, faculty, and students, alumni, and others about lots of different topics. And for me, the most important thing is that I'm there at the table when we're talking about large budget issues, some kind of structural change, some kind of announcement that often in decision making, what it looks like and the communication of it is almost as significant as the substance of the decision itself. I think that's what we're missing, and it seems to have been well received. It's been a good move for all of us.
So there's a lot of communicators in higher ed that are in a similar position or situation that you were in, where they maybe inherit a role that doesn't report to the president or doesn't have a seat at the table or on the cabinet. So what advice would you give to your professional colleagues that are maybe in a situation like that? How can they start to change perceptions internally on their campus and make that case for the all-important seat at the table with the president?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think that in a way, maybe I was fortunate because we had a president change anyway, and she forced some of these issues to happen because of what she brought from her experience, and what she saw as what she would need from her communications officer. I think that, however, I also helped that along, I think, by making myself useful, from day one, and I think that that's probably the piece of advice that I would give. It is, I think presidents are more and more communication savvy anyway, and whether presidents that have been in place for a while or new ones coming on board, they can see that headlines and social media mentions and other forms of communication happen more quickly and often with more impact, and they look around at some of the crises that have hit higher ed in the last year or two, and I think they're much savvier to the need to communicate well and in a sophisticated way. So I think our challenge is to make sure that we're being proactive and thoughtful for presidents or vice presidents, whoever you are reporting to, in being helpful. I think that in my case, I had an opportunity as we were making the announcement of a new president to work with her a lot, developing press releases and talking points, and working with kind of the nuts and bolts of making a president announcement. But in the course of that, I tried to help her as much as possible by pointing out key audiences, key faculty members, messages that our community would want to hear, messages that our community might not want to hear, and um, because we've got to make our, we want our president to succeed and look good, right? I mean, that's a lot of the job of a communications officer. So being in there and being helpful, and I think another thing, at least that our president has appreciated is that she can count on hearing the truth from me, or at least, let's say, not always hearing just what people think she wants to hear. And I like to think that people in our business have a relatively objective point of view, and something we are always thinking about, well, what is the headline going to be? How is this going to play? How am I going to use this message? And being able to deliver that to a president in a way that they can see the benefit of pulling you into the game earlier and having you report closer and bringing you into more cabinet meetings. And I think all of those things start to click once they see the value of what you can contribute.
One of the things that we talked about a little earlier this week when we were preparing for our discussion here was, having a seat on the cabinet. When you think about other members and senior leaders at an institution who are on the cabinet, they all have very specific metrics that they're responsible for, that they report. So the vice president of business and finance has the financial metrics and the operating metrics of the college. The vice president of advancement obviously has financial metrics of fundraising and number of gifts. Enrollment has metrics like yield and melt, and are they making the freshman class or not. And so that's one thing that cabinet level members have in common. They all have metrics that they're accountable for. What are the metrics that you, as the head of communications, are accountable for, and what are you sharing with your president to kind of reinforce the value of your function and show that you're being effective?
Well, thank goodness for technology. I think a lot of that has changed in our business just in the last few years. In my opinion, it was kind of hard to really quantify the success of a marketing or a communications-oriented project unless you were, when I was at the Madavi Center, the Performing Arts Center at UC Davis, I had great metrics. Every week we knew exactly what the ticket sales figures were, and we knew how to make adjustments and get better at what we were doing. But I think for a long time we hobbled by on magazine readership surveys, and a few other things. There's an adage in advertising, there was for a long time about always knowing that you were wasting half of your budget. You just didn't know which
John
half.
Wanamaker, yes.
Yes, thank you. Couldn't remember. And so, but now we have QR codes, we have web metrics, we have email marketing campaigns and open rates and click-through rates and all kinds of things. So we are in the midst of figuring out how to use these tools now and get that data up into the hands of cabinet members and president. And we've been fairly, I think, successful at that so far. So, we redesigned our website about a year and a half ago. And when we did that, we had web trends running. I think we're on Google Analytics now. But whatever tool you're using, I was sure to let people know we had a 25% jump after the redesign on a lot of our metrics. So I think this is also part of sort of making sure you remain relevant and useful to your president or your cabinet members. You want to get that information up to people and let people know that you did a good job. And also, frankly, that you're tracking it, because I think a lot of people don't realize that you can track and measure these things, and even if you're not happy with the results early on, you can tweak and show results of improvements. We launched a new email newsletter this fall for our staff and our faculty, and we built it on a email marketing system that would allow us, like constant contact or vertical response, those kinds of tools will, to measure open rates and click-through rates. And we are tracking all those things right now by staff, by faculty. Our Board of Regents receive the email newsletters, so I can tell my president each week, how many of our board members opened the last issue. We track by cabinet or by campus, since we have our main campus in Stockton, but the law and dental schools, we can look at their open rates too. And so we use this as a tool and we do this on the website too, looking at the traffic there. We will use this as an internal planning tool, looking at what kinds of stories seem to be getting clicked on. Athletics, has been a big, maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it's been the big shocker for me. How even among faculty, often the athletic stories are the most popular ones. So you can do your message planning, your story planning in a more sophisticated way when you see what people are clicking on, which pages are getting the longest time on page and the lowest bounce rates and all that. And then I can use this as a reporting tool to the president. When we launched the email newsletter, we had a 25% open rate, which we thought wasn't bad, but I also was hoping it would be better considering it's an internal newsletter. And now we're up to 40%. And I've been able to share that information. I think people are reading this now as a success. That's been thanks to being around for a while, but also making a lot of changes, looking at the more fine-grained information in these reports that we get. So, and all that said, I don't think I could do that without a couple of web people on my staff that I didn't have 5 years ago, who can build these reports and answer my phone calls and clarify questions and get the information in my hands so that it can help us all do a better job and also help report on whether we're doing a good job.
Great. So we've talked about how your team is organized at Pacific. We've talked about the importance of making sure that the communications function has a seat at the table, reports to the president. I just kind of want to open it up to other experiences that you've had in your past life at other institutions, or just from talking with colleagues at other institutions within higher ed, when it comes to organizational structure, things that you've seen or heard about that are interesting to you, or that you think might work well, or things that you've seen that don't work well.
So I have a couple of thoughts, I guess, on maybe more in that last category about observations looking around recently. This is not our topic tonight, but I would love to hear sometime how many other campuses are going through this. So we are training our communication staff and a lot of our other staff around the university on FEMA incident management processes. There's the NIMS, National Incident Management System, I think it stands for, that came into place after 9/11. And so we're all getting certified on command structures, decision-making structures. And one of the side, I think, takeaways for me about that is they have this very important rule in Homeland Security that nobody has more than 5 reports. And as soon as you have a team of larger than 5, then you need to split up your group, even in the middle of an emergency, in order to be effective. And I find that really interesting. It was one of the driving factors for me in restructuring my staff just, in the last week or two, going from a PR team, a web team, a publications and design unit, and then 2 other marketers on my staff. And I thought, well, I'm going to consolidate this and put groups of people together that seem like good compatible teams to work together, so it'll keep me under 5 reports. So I thought that was interesting. I think that another one is that I hear in the conferences I go to, or in talking to some of my colleagues, I hear people using a lot more advertising agency sort of models and kind of talking about that structure and that I think that frame of mind than we used to. 20 years ago, I was at the Museum of Modern Art, and we weren't allowed to say the word marketing. It was the M word. And I've worked at other institutions, that still had that term banned. But at most of our institutions, that ban has gone away, and I think a lot of us are just trying to figure out how to take these existing staff structures and job expectations and go from this classic problem of being kind of a passive or reactive in-house Kinko's shop and putting out our press releases into becoming a well-oiled machine that's conceiving and driving big and important strategic messaging projects for our institutions. And I spent a couple of years at an ad agency. I liked that structure of having kind of an account executive or account supervisor, some kind in charge of a group, and then when I was one, I would pull in my bosses for certain things, and I'd pull in designers or copywriters or market researchers, media planners. I mean, you pulled in resources as you needed them, to move through a project. So I like to think that's part of what we're building here, and I hear about other institutions thinking more and more that way too.
So that's a good segue. Sorry, that's a good segue for one of the questions that was coming in from one of our viewers. Kind of what you're getting at with nomenclature. The question is, does social media belong under marketing or communications? So in your mind, first of all, what's the direct answer to the question, and what's really the difference between marketing and communications in your view?
Well, this definitely gets back to your question also about generalists versus specialists and cross-training of staff. So I have put social media firmly in our PR and web staff. Now, I've kind of cheated a little by moving my web team into reporting to the director of PR. And because I think that's sort of the way we use it. Social media is, we're Facebooking and tweeting and, and so many other things so quickly all day long that it feels like, even if it's not necessarily formal news that we're putting out through those channels, it feels like a fast-paced news oriented activity. Our wonderful PR manager who left recently was just a social media guru, and lived and breathed the stuff and loved it. That could also have played a role in my decision to keep responsibility there. But all that said, there's a couple other people around the staff who are interested and willing to help. Our managing editor sent a photographer out last night to get the basketball team boarding the airplane to the NCAA tournament just for social media. He sent back the pictures, and we posted them on Facebook last night. And we may use those other places, but the idea was to do immediate turnaround stuff. So my PR and web staff are not the only ones who are thinking about this. It is, this gets into issues of account management and and how many people can kind of log into your Hootsuite or your Twitter account or various things. But I think that who knows, we could change up again as individual staff members come in and out with different strengths and weaknesses. I don't feel wed to that decision, but that's how we've done it.
Another question that we had come in is, what do you do when there are disagreements on what strategic communications goals should be?
Good question. So I guess my philosophy is that to a large extent, strategic communications should be my job. And whoever the head of communications is at the institution, in my opinion, is the one. That's what my president expects. So she will expect me to drive strategy and let her know what our strategy is, or we have that that discussion process too. In my team, I am finding it more and more helpful, though, once we lay down our key messages, our strategic messages, to let staff run with the messages, and work on the tactical level to implement across magazines and other printed collateral and online and so forth. So I'm not sure if this is a good answer to the question, but I guess that's how I see it. I try to have strategic messaging discussions with our staff. We spent the last year doing a ton of market research, a big comprehensive reputational study of University of the Pacific. So we have a good handle now on how different markets perceive our university. And sometimes the lack of perception, frankly, that we found out there. So we have.
You guys are in Oregon, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And now we have a strategy, a message strategy that's built on what we learned. My staff are clear on that strategy, and they're rolling that out. So I have less day-to-day sort of involvement in that. And where we have disagreements, I think that's for me to work out with my managers, or every once in a while I'll go show up in a staff meeting and we argue there. And I think I'm not always right. We've done stories that I didn't think sufficiently reinforced strategic, brand messaging, and I'm happy with the outcome or not happy, but this is the way it works. And I think you have to allow for some flexibility there too.
Good. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon too, and you were just starting to do this in some of your previous answers, but your president counts on you for strategic communications, and you're on the cabinet, you're influencing and informing the communication strategy of University of the Pacific. But another important part of your job is making sure that your staff is developing and getting opportunities to be exposed to senior leadership at the institution, so that it's not just you as a single point of failure, for example, but your whole staff is equipped, and they're growing for their own professional development, but also to make your function stronger. So what are some of the things that you're doing in that regard, or other things you've seen that work well?
Yeah, I think that's very important, and I don't think it's something that I've been able to launch very successfully yet. So that's, again, now that we've sort of settled into a structure, and we've got, with a few exceptions, the people on board in the positions, it's time to really focus, I think, on staff development. We've always been pretty good about, I think, sending people to conferences and workshops and things like that. We do, when people do webinars. So that stuff probably helps. I would like my staff to network more, because I think that's really valuable. I'd love to have more sort of networks out, from between like people at my institution and other institutions, because we do have a lot of people who are fairly new over the last year or two. It's been important to make sure that our president and other cabinet members and our deans know who those people are, because I'm not always around, and it's not very useful for me to make myself a sort of logjam in the middle of communications between different people. So I try not to be protective about relationships, with the president and other people like that. I still work with her the most, much more than other members of my team, but she also knows the PR folks and the writers and the photographer and a few of the other people, and what they do. And I think that's important. To tell you the truth, I kind of feel like the more she sees my team doing a good job, that's it's going to reflect well on me. And just like those of us on the cabinet and other leadership positions, are need to make president look good and help her be successful. I think so it's important to, I think, give credit where credit is due. Sometimes my staff know when that happens, and sometimes they don't. We had an especially busy day a couple days ago where my editor sent me a list of all the things the team had accomplished in one day, and it was extraordinary. It was a ridiculous, embarrassingly ridiculous list. It was just a busy day, and I forwarded it on to the president and said, look what we did, and and I got a response back, and very, very happy response. So I think that that's important. And sometimes it's just, I was alluding a little to this earlier, sometimes it's just getting out of the way or empowering people, however you want to look at it. I had virtually nothing to do with our new email newsletter that we launched last fall, the staff and faculty email newsletter, which is being so well received now. Our web team and the writers and editors, the graphic designers, and our PR people, and practically everybody in the office formed a work group, and they didn't invite me to the meetings, and they just they pounded out a good content plan and a good technical plan, and over a few months we had it done, and it looks really good. I still got my chance to weigh in and change stuff when I wanted to, but I think that helps also. We were talking a little also, sometimes also trial by fire is a good, just throw people into it and let them figure it out. And With the amount of new
That's
staff that I have, that's sometimes inevitable anyway. But it can be a good way to build confidence in people and get them to learn.
so trial by fire is a good segue into a question that we just got from Twitter from Sean.
Uh-huh.
How do you set priorities when everyone's project is a priority and due today?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'm sure that every single whether we have 20 or 200 viewers online right now, I'm sure that every single one of you has the same problem in your office. So we have made a really concerted effort to start saying no in my office, and I'm starting to get complaints from units around the campus, including a dean or two, or other people now and then when we turn down a job. We are trying to keep our eye on the ball. We've put a lot of resources into strategic research. We've got good, solid, market-tested strategic messages to market with, and I think there's an expectation now with the staff resources I have that we are to do an integrated strategic messaging communications campaign. So if I'm going to do that, that means we're probably going to have to stop spinning wheels on odd jobs. And so we're trying to think about, let's say, event promotion. If an event is unlikely to draw more than 100 people, we're probably not going to do a lot of work promoting that event. And we try to be as clear as we can with people and give them some tools. We've created a few flyer templates. We've created some ad templates. We've created some ways to submit events to our event calendar on the website. We've got a form to fill out to get an event listed in our, this e-newsletter that I've been talking about. Just trying to provide some tools because I think so much of project prioritization in a higher ed shop is about responding to all of these requests for event invitations and a flyer for that event, and I need a brochure for this program, or I want a video for that program. So it's hard to start saying no, especially when it's a change, as it was in our case. I think we're surprising some people. We've cut way back with our photographer on the amount of on the events that we will agree to shoot with our centrally funded university photographer. I have a list of freelancers, and we give those out more, or graphic designers, the same thing. We'll give freelance writer recommendations to dean's offices now. So I'm not sure everybody is happy with that, but I will also tell you that those same deans and vice presidents, if I take the time to explain to them, we don't have the capacity to work on your project because I have 5 team members who are working right now on a massive promotion for a Brubeck festival, or for a series of videos featuring faculty, a faculty billboard that's going to go up at the airport. If I put it in context, more often than not, I get a pretty understanding response in it. But I think in our case, one of the toughest barriers to overcome in prioritization was just accepting the need to get on the phone with somebody and say no and explain why.
Great. Any final thoughts before we sign off for the night on organizational structure or advice that you have?
I would love to hear suggestions. Even if people tweet things afterwards online. I'm not sure that we have all the solutions in place here, and we're in the midst of a lot of change. Like we've been talking about. I think we're all in the same boat. I think that lots of colleges and universities have presidents who have expectations that have changed in the last 5 years of their communications shops, and we may or may not be getting many more resources to work with that. So I think you have to be creative and be pretty thick-skinned about prioritizing. I thought that last question was an important one.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and insight and expertise tonight and sharing it with us. It was a great conversation. I'm sure it sparked a lot of ideas. Before we wrap up, I want to first, of course, wish the University of Pacific Tigers best of luck in the NIT and the NCAA tournament. I know that as the avid basketball fan that you are, you can't wait for the game. But
go Tigers!
Good luck to the Tigers, definitely. And then speaking of luck, congratulations to Jeff B. Campbell and Moonball, who are the two winners of our free passes to the .edu Guru online summit. So I'll follow up with both of you after the show, and I'll explain how to get your passes. Next week on Higher Ed Live, it's a case study right from my own backyard, Skidmore College, which is about 10 minutes up the road from me in Saratoga Springs. The topic is Social Works, Getting Social with Your Donors, Skidmore's 24-hour challenge. And host Ryan Catherwood from the University of Virginia will interview Daniela Norden and Jen Castellani from Skidmore. And this new case study demonstrates that social media has the maturity and the reach to be an integrated component of development campaigns. So be sure to tune in next Thursday, same time, same place, same bat channel, for this great case study with the folks from Skidmore. Thanks again to Rich. Thanks to all the Higher Ed Live viewers, and we will see you out on the interwebs.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, everybody.